Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Earl Morgan Hour. I'm your host, Earl Morgan, and I think tonight, as usual, we have 60 minutes of information, education, and inspiration for all of you out in the GoPro universe. But first, let me remind you, you're watching the Earl Morgan Hour on the GoPro Radio Network. You can like us on Facebook at the Earl Morgan Hour and Twitter at the Earl Morgan Hour. And you can call us here in the studio while we're on the air if you have something you'd like to add to the conversation at 714-888-7444. We really encourage you to dialogue with us. We value and appreciate your comments. This week we're going to have the two people who are trying desperately and grimly to save a street in the middle of Jersey City called Martin Luther King Drive. Like most Martin Luther King drives, it's a bit of a disaster. But they're trying to revitalize it and bring it back to its old glory. It once was the shopping hub of the county. And that is Michelle Massey, the executive director of the Jackson Hill Special Improvement District, and Tyrone Rose, who is the chairman of the board of the Jackson Hill Special Improvement District. I think you'll find them very interesting and insightful about what it's going to take to make some of our main streets come back to where they were. But right now, we're going to go into our book note segment of the program. And this week's segment, we're featuring the book Slavery by Another Name, written by Douglas Blockman, who tells a well-researched and heart-rending story of peonage, a system white Southerners adopted that essentially re-enslaved thousands of black men and women in the post-Civil War era by arresting them on usually trumped-up charges, then bringing them before a magistrate who found them guilty and levied a fine against them that they could not possibly pay. The unfortunate victims snared in this trap are then assigned to some local businessman, farmer, coal mine, steel mill, turpentine factory, whatever, to work off his debt. Often the men seized in these circumstances find it impossible to work off their debt and spend years toiling away for literally slave wages. Many died, never seeing their loved ones again, who had no idea what happened to their sons, husbands, or grandsons, though So they actually had workers that died there, and they threw them in these unmarked graves. These black men, they just threw them in the unmarked graves. Now, there were white men who got caught up in this too. You've seen chain gang movies, so you know it's not. But this was something much more insidious. This was a way to take a man's freedom away from him over a few dollars. That's, you're walking down the street. They ask you to give a good account of yourself. You allegedly can't give a good account of yourself. So they say, well, come with me, boy. And we'll have to see what you're doing out here in the street. The next day you're brought in front of a magistrate who hits you with a $20 fine. Now, we're talking, say, 1898. $20 was a lot of money. So you can't work that. You don't have it, so they send you to a mine to work it off. This was terrible. This was an awful way for people to have to live. And there were women that got caught up in this too. And it was just not very good. And women were used sexually. Men were beaten, killed, worked literally to death. The way that Blockman wrote this book, even with his meticulous researching, it's a compelling read. Once you start, I guarantee you will not want to put it down. He did a fine job and a fine service to the nation to write a book like this. And I think we're now ready to go into our next segment, which we call Right Jab. Now, this week's Right Jab is a bit funny because I'm not really taking a jab at the rights, the Tea Party right. What I'm doing is actually going to encourage them to keep doing what they're doing. It's really strange because the Southern Republican state legislatures who have pushed this reactionary agenda so far that a backlash has begun to burgeon in North Carolina, Mississippi, South Carolina, and other parts of the South, where a movement has sprung up called the Monday Movement. And the interesting thing about the Monday Movement, it started out of a school desegregation or school segregation case and began to build from there, and built and built and built. And now on Mondays throughout in North Carolina and in several other states, Georgia, I believe, South Carolina, the movement is spreading there. Nobody has seen anything like this since the Civil Rights Movement. We keep thinking that we're all jaded and dead. And the interesting thing about this is even more, the Civil Rights Movement was mainly a black, an African American run and led operation. This is more or less run by an African American clergyman, but there are all kinds of people out there with him. It is really something to see. And there are all kinds of issues, be it abortion, voting rights. They're all out there. And they're all carrying signs, and it was cold out there the other day, and they were out there. I don't know if I'd be out there in that weather, but they were out there, and they were determined to make their message, to leave their message with the legislature that they don't like what they're doing, and they intend to try to make a change. Now, here's my right jab. If you want to call this a right jab, I really would like the Southern legislators or legislatures to continue doing what they're doing. Heap on more, rules and regulations to interfere with people's individual rights, because it seems to stir up the populace and bring them out and prove that people do care. And they're talking about all kinds of ways of changing the legislature so that these guys sitting in the halls and the state assemblies and state senates will not be there anymore. So their plan to cut back on voters' rights, on everybody else's rights, on gay rights, the only thing it's done is really cause this backlash, which may unseat them. So I'm all for you guys keeping it up. More repression. It seems to be a good idea. It seems to be something that actually works. It's an organizing tool. Martin Luther King and the SCLC had the natural opposition to the kinds of segregation and Jim Crow laws that existed in the South for years. That was what they fought against. It was a tough, hard fight. And the interesting thing is, and what I think has happened in the interim, once all those civil rights movements, and Brown v. Board of Education, open housing, things came into a lull. Nobody knew what to do. The types of segregation and racial bias that existed after that was very subtle. It wasn't in your face like go sit in the back of the bus or for coloreds only drinking fountains. This was something different that's happened in the current modern times. This is a kind of segregation, discrimination, racial bias that's very hard to get at. And the people practicing the discrimination, as we said, they're not Mr. Charlie anymore. They're Sir Charles and Mr. Charles, and they don't wear hoods. They wear suits and ties, and they do their business that way. And they learned how to change rules and regulations so as to keep minority groups out and only include them when they absolutely have to. This sort of a thing has been going on for the last 30 years. Finally, the people on the right, so fed up with what they think is some kind of loss of freedom, decided they had to take decisive action, and they organized and seized control of state legislatures all over the South. They did it legally. They did it using the ballot box. But as soon as they got the ballot box, they decided to make sure that certain other people didn't get to the ballot box. They started passing crazy laws that cut down on voting time, that said, well, you can't use your student ID to vote. All kinds of cockamamie things. In Texas, if you don't have an ID, you can use your gun registration, which is a strange thing to who carries around a gun registration. So you cause this whole pressure to build up and mount, and it had to find an outlet, and now it has. And it's sort of refreshing to see that there is still a movement in the country and among the people to do something about this. What is different than maybe even the civil rights movement, which incidentally had all kinds of people in it. A lot of white people died, not a lot, but several white people died that we know of, to make the Voting Rights Act happen and some of those other dastardly laws go away. But this movement that's going on now in the South, it is refreshing, because you see old white guys, old as me, out there, pushing it. You see young kids out there. You see mothers and fathers and sons and daughters, and they're all really, some of them, they don't mind going to jail. They get arrested and go to jail. When was the last time we saw that happen? I don't think I've seen anything like this since the anti-war demonstrations of the 60s against the Vietnamese War. It's funny about that, but when you think about it, it sort of makes sense. There's only so much pressure you can put on people before they rebel, before they say enough. You're not going to go any further with this. We're not going to let you. And I think that's what's happened in our southern tier of states, or at least what's beginning to happen, because this movement started in one place, and it's spreading out like an ink blot to other states. There's also another movement in Florida, led by a young black man, against the stand your ground laws. And he's got a bunch of young, hardy, black and white people who were working with him to do something about the stand your ground laws, the law that ultimately was responsible, or partly responsible, for the death of Trayvon Martin. Which brings me to another thing that we have to talk about tonight. There was a young man killed in Florida not too long ago. There's a trial going on now. It was a young man in an SUV. Supposedly there was an argument about loud music from his SUV by a white guy sitting in his car next to it. When the smoke cleared, the white gentleman had fired 10 shots into that SUV and killed 17-year-old boy. The trial is going on now. I've seen some of it. It is very, very interesting because this is a straight up and down stand your ground. He claimed he saw a gun or the barrel of a gun, and that's why he was in fear for his life and fired these 10 shots into this SUV. However, no one's seen a gun. No gun has been recovered. No one knows what he's talking about. And during the trial, they settled on this. They tried using this period after he had fired the gun and pulled off. He was waiting for his fiancée. When she came, they got in the car and pulled off. He never called the police. They went back to their hotel, had a pizza, and went to bed. Now, the way he described it, they were all in mortal fear of their life because they were afraid that this SUV full of thugs that were going to track them down and do some kind of injury to them, which was not going to happen. But they're now the attorney for this, the defendant, is claiming that 3 minutes is crucial because no one knows whether these guys ditched the gun. And why didn't anybody know? Well, nobody knew because the defendant had fled the scene. He drove off. Nobody could find him, as opposed to calling the police and saying, look, there was a shooting I was involved in. It was not a case. It was a self-defense case. The next day he went home to Florida, told a law enforcement officer he knew, I think was an FBI agent. The Broward County Police in Florida came, picked him up, and took him to trial. The thing that's interesting about this man is he sounds like a very normal, straight character. You watched him break down a couple of times on the witness stand. He's well spoken. He's a pilot. He's done all kinds of things. He worked with his father's scuba diving business, and he was fine as long as his lawyer was asking the questions. When the prosecutor got up to ask questions, the whole tenor of this trial changed, and the hostility between him and the prosecutor was really obvious. But what made this case so interesting was that the fiancée to the defendant told her story and said at no time did her lover ever say there was a gun involved from the other side, from the SUV. She never heard it. He never told. She said that on the witness stand. It's going to be interesting to see what the jury makes of that, because if the guy's fiancée won't back his story up, it makes it a difficult story to keep together, to hold together. So I think this is one of those cases where, and incidentally, the lawyers, the prosecutors at least, are all some of this, or not all, but several of them are the same prosecutors that were involved in the Trayvon Martin case. But they got a better case this time, I think, for them to win, because there was no gun found. The guy fired, he didn't just fire a warning shot, he didn't shoot the tires, he fired 10 times into an SUV and killed the kid. And without any real problem, he claims that the young man cursed him out and got out of the car, and he said he thought he was in danger of being killed because he saw a gun, or what he said was the barrel of a gun, which he seemed to indicate was what he thought was a shotgun, but there was never any gun found. So he is now, I guess the jury is deliberating as we speak to find out what happened to him. All right, we're getting ready to go into another break, at which time we will bring on my guests for this evening, Ms. Michelle Massey and Mr. Tyrone Rose. I have to tell you, the reason I make that mistake is I get him confused with his father, his late father, Jerome. He's a great man. Okay. going to break. We'll be right back. Absolutely. All right, we're back. I'm here back at the GoPro Radio headquarters, and this is Earl Morgan speaking, your host for the Earl Morgan Hour. Incidentally, that's not a matter of narcissism. That wasn't my idea, but I liked it when I heard it. You can catch us on Facebook at the Earl Morgan Hour, on Twitter at the Earl Morgan Hour, and if you wish to call in and voice your opinion or give us some kind of comment, you can do that while we're on the air at 718-888-7444. Now, let me get into our guests. I am really honored to have Tyrone Rose, president of the Jackson Hill Improvement District. Tyrone Rose. I did it again? Why do I keep doing that? I knew his father very well, and I always think Rose Jerome. It's Tyrone Rose. He is the president of the board of the Jackson Hill Improvement District, and I have Michelle Massey, an old friend of mine, whose family and I go back many, many, many years. Michelle Massey, who is the executive director of the Jackson Hill Improvement District. They've accepted the challenge, and I do mean challenge, of restoring Martin Luther King Drive, formerly Jackson Avenue, to its historic glory. At one time, it was the main shopping hub in Hudson County. I happen to remember the tail end of that because I'm just that old. But it is not that. It's like every other Martin Luther King Drive, every other Martin Luther King Boulevard. Somehow we managed to name the worst streets in our cities after a towering figure because he was black. I always said, why don't we name Kennedy Boulevard? Rename Kennedy Boulevard after Martin Luther King. No, that didn't happen. But they're charged with the really charged with the responsibility of trying to make all that thoroughfare work again, and it's hard. It's very hard. Things have changed. The merchants that were there before that led it to its glory days are all gone. Most of them are moved away. It was heavily Jewish merchants. They got old. Their kids, they sent them to college as they should have, and those kids became dentists, proctologists, psychologists, scientists. They were not hardly coming back to run a store on Jackson Avenue. So they went away. The parents then said, well, you know, You know, he doesn't want to do it, she doesn't want to do it, and they moved to Florida. And everything began to shut down. It happened like almost overnight. And now it is a long a long string of streets that go right straight through the heart of the black community. And it needs a lot. Let's start by asking, first of all, what is the scope of what you have to do? Let's ask Mr. Rose to start this off.
Okay. Well, first, Mr. Morgan, thank you for having us. We really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
being here. I got to correct you on one thing now.
Yes.
Everyone didn't move away from Martin Luther King in Monticello. I'm actually a second generation, believe it or not, business owner.
Of course, I didn't say Monticello, but that's a technicality.
We call it one huge conglomerate.
Let me just interrupt for 1 second. I have to. This is, as a reporter, I've always learned this. What Mr. Rose is talking about is his business, Independent Beauty Supply, which is a long time staple of the black community on Monticello Avenue. It's a good business, and the Rose family has maintained their position in our community for years against tremendous odds. So I not only agree with you, I applaud you for that. But continue.
Right. Yeah. It is a huge challenge, and I think we knew that going into the formation of the SID. You called on me first, but I think Michelle really has.
All right, then fine.
She has the background that kind of led us up to this point. So I think Michelle will probably be best starting from the early days of prior to there being a combination of Monticello and MLK.
Well, let's clarify that too, because we didn't mention that. Monticello, Martin Luther King Drive flows into Monticello Avenue, which is almost a continuation, or used to be a continuation of Martin Luther King Drive, with the same type of vibrant mercantile ambiance. I mean, they had everything down there from sports stores to ice cream parlors and everything. So yes, Michelle, would you please enlighten us?
Well, first let me explain to the audience. Thank you, as Tyrone said, for having us.
My pleasure.
The Jackson Hill Main Street Special Improvement District runs from the south corner of Fairmount Avenue and Monticello straight through all the way to McAdoo, the end of MLK Drive, right, with a small section on Communipaw Avenue. Our district is 2.4 miles long, and it is arguably the largest SID in the state of New Jersey. Jackson Hill started, originally it was Monticello Main Street. The designation was received by New Jersey Department of Community Affairs and the National Historic Trust. There were two efforts going on, and to make the long story short, the opportunity came for both sides to join forces to create a larger SID, quite frankly, to lessen the burden upon the property owners. And the Main Street was agreeable to let us loop MLK Drive into that national designation. You asked what was the goal? We tried. The goal is simply to bring it back. We are driven to improve it economically, physically, economically, and work with those existing efforts in the community however we can, because you and I have spoken about how one organization or individual cannot do it all.
No.
You know, our community has several issues. And
several, at least.
Actually, Mr. Morgan and I were talking the other day, and kind of compared it to an onion. And
with layers.
There's different layers. But the SID, and I think what's important to denote is that the Special Improvement District is not that silver bullet. It's just really the beginning stage of it. And really, to answer your question in terms of what are we charged with, we're really simply charged with the economic revitalization of the drive. We're not, our job is not to cure all the social ills or really to repair those things that have taken years to get there. We're really charged with trying to bring back business, trying to bring back prosperity. And the first step in that, because there's so many layers, is to start getting it to the point where it's an attractive place where a business will want to come, where a business can strive. So I think working in conjunction with some of the other organizations and some of the other programs that are already in place is going to be key, because some of those things that we're not really equipped or made to address, if we're all on the same page and we all have the same goal, I think we can address a lot of the other issues too.
But in our community, not to give anything away or to air any dirty laundry, but that's a little bit like herding cats. We're not all moving in the same direction often. Seems like we should be, but that's the way human beings are often. So how do you see yourselves being able to bridge that gap? Is there a way? Have you found or thought of a way to make that happen? Because one of the things you said I found interesting, and you're right, you can't be curing all those social ills because they're very, very deep and they're complicated and complex. But without that, you can't bring it back. So this is like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Now, clearly, what you guys have got to do as an SID is clean it up, make it presentable. That's what I think you're talking about, so that you can. But how do you do that? I mean, what's the mechanism you're using? What things have you done that will make that happen to push that goal forward of making it a more presentable street?
I want to toss it back to Michelle to talk about maybe the 4 steps from the Main Street program, which will answer that question. But I think to answer your the question about how can you bring it back when it's not there. The fact is there's so many disposable dollars that are leaving the community, and there are none of the resources that we need. You can't walk down Monticello or MLK and find a dry cleaners, a pharmacy. You can't find, well, you can find a couple of grocery stores, but really nothing to the caliber of what you can find in other areas. So all these services and all these resources are needed, and people have money to spend on these things. So the point is, how do we create, it's a chicken and an egg at the same time, yeah. But how do you create these things, or we have to create those things so that we can first start keeping the dollars in the community as well. And I think the Main Street process is the steps and the committees are one of the ways that we go about kind of organizing the issues.
I was at a meeting of the Jackson Hill SID not too long ago, which was the genesis of this program. And I came there because I'd heard was, oh, these guys, they want money and they want us to do this. And I got into the meeting and I listened and I said, no, these guys are right. You can't do this without some kind of resources. You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to get a pot and put some dollars in it. And we're talking about the police department. You're talking about garbage. How do you see that? How are you going to gin it up from, because I know you have your own ways of keeping the drive clean, which is a Herculean job. I understand that you're beginning to do that. You're looking to improve the police presence on the drive. How far has that gotten? How well has that been working out?
I'm just going to take it back a second to answer the previous comment. We're not the average special improvement district. We also, with that Main Street designation, are afforded technical services and an actual proven method of revitalizing commercial districts. And it's called the Main Street 4-point approach, and it's based on organization, design, which addresses all things physical and tangible in the district, promotions, and of course economic restructuring. And by applying these 4 points with the aid of Main Street, again through various technical services for not just the organization but our businesses and property owners, you just got to keep plugging away. I go by the path of least resistance. Everyone is not buying in right now, even though a great deal. Every year there's more and more people buying in. You got to just keep doubling around and keep coming back. Knock, 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 knock. And more doors are starting to open regarding that. The types of things that the average SID, which we are taking the approach, is addressing the cleanliness of the district and the safety of the district. The ultimate goal, which I have said repeatedly, is not that these assessment dollars are just spent on those things. And yes, there is the great debate that we're paying for city services from the property and business owners. And I made a point at the council meeting recently that the number of man hours it takes 7 days a week to clean MLK Drive and Monticello and those portions of Communipaw, change out the garbage, remove the garbage, and when it gets warmer there's going to be power washing of the sidewalks, graffiti removal. We're taking it to another level, and it's more controlled and dictated by us how that get done. There is no way the city can afford to do it to that level and to that degree in which we need it. Ultimately, if the city keeps applying more and more services to our area, yes, the goal is to lessen the amount of money that we allocate for those things. But right now, we need to do it ourselves. Improvement district designations are self-help programs. It's in the legislation. And most of them start by wanting the physical appearance of their districts to look better. As far as safety, we actually cut the budget quite a bit with regard to policing. With the new administration, there has been a stronger presence. Some of those problem areas have subsided. Occasionally, something might spur up, but it's winter time. We went through a year of off-duty police, and we got a better understanding of where the money could be best applied. And right now, in the warmer months, we definitely
that will tell the tale.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The warmer months,
Right.
we have monies allocated to put police out there
Right.
if they are needed.
Right. And not only if they are needed, but in the places that they're needed in foot patrol. We've been able to
Community
identify those hot spots, those spots where there's a lot of activity, and that's where we kind of focus the off-duty police, because they're off-duty police that we hire. One of the challenges that we face is that as Michelle said, the legislature designates how much we can spend for policing. But if there's other jobs that the city has going on that pays a higher rate than we do, then of course off-duty police are going to take the higher paying jobs.
Yeah.
And
Matter of fact, quiet as it kept, police make more money with their off-duty jobs than they make with their paycheck.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of challenges going on, because with the Skyway closing and that traffic directing through Jersey City, which is going to be a nightmare, that's going to be something. There's the pipeline coming through, so there's all these things are drawing the police away. But one of the first meetings we had with the new administration was we were trying to come up with some creative ways. We just really throwing some things around as to what we needed. We talked about bicycle policing. Why can't we hire 3 bicycle police to just work an area, because they can cover more distance? And really, one of the things that came out was that the police don't really stop the crime, they move it. Their presence prevents it from happening.
What happens is the criminals aren't stupid.
Right.
If the police are there, they go somewhere else.
So it's not like by them being there, they're really foiling crime. They're making it, their presence kind of deters it. So those are some of the things that we're working on, and I think that the way that we have the ability to use the dollars and use them when we need them most is pretty effective.
Well, with the advent of the new police director and the new police chief, what I found was that these guys are a little different than what I had expected. They seem a little bit more professional. They seem a little bit more committed to the job. Now, the problem they have is 5 guys get shot in 3 days, and that happens, and often right on King Drive. They can respond to that, but they can't stop it. Because they're not a social service agency. They're the police department. They arrest you when you did something wrong.
It was said earlier that none of this was created overnight.
Right.
And it's not going to be solved and resolved overnight. So as we do what we do, for example, we're doing business recruitment. We're starting a business recruitment program. There's never been an entity that I'm aware of in this city that marketed and focused specifically on the inner areas of this city. Because if a business is interested in coming to Jersey City, generally they reference downtown.
Yeah.
There are people who don't even know Jersey City goes beyond downtown.
I know. I've met some of them.
And so we're like, you know what? No one in the city does it. We're going to do it for ourselves. Again, self-help. So marketing materials are being created. I've just approved a prospect list. We're targeting businesses based on market analysis that was done and paid for, interestingly enough, by the Jersey City Economic Development Corporation in the city. We're actually applying this data to a methodical, logical way of bringing in businesses and those needed businesses. Now, as we do that, guess what? We have basic goods and services start to appear in our community that did not before. And, oh, isn't that Miss Johnson's son working behind the counter? And isn't that her granddaughter in the back? So now we're creating jobs. Now we are partnering with those business owners and other community organizations with job training programs to say, we've got 5 positions to place. I mean, it's all connected. Everyone has their role, but there's connections.
The best example of what you're talking about that I've seen there is the Key Food Store, because I think the guys that own that store and are operating it aren't black people.
No,
but they surely hired black people, and those are good people. They're nice and polite, and they know what they're doing. And to me, that's a sort of a model of where we got to go. You got to start putting people to work.
But see, that gets established when you develop relationships with those businesses. They don't necessarily have to walk into an area that they're looking to make money and really care about said community.
That's exactly right.
But you know, if you come to the Jackson Hill district and they said you need to connect with the Main Street office, then we're talking to them and we're saying, you know what, if you're looking for employees, and you know, we'll work with you. We'll coordinate a ribbon cutting. We'll draw people and help market your business.
And the same was done with the Dunkin' Donuts when they were looking to start doing the hiring for the new Dunkin' Donuts. It was coordinated through us. Another important thing with the business recruitment is that we not only start to begin building jobs, but we're helping to get vacant properties filled, because what we're doing is matching the property owners with the right type of company that wants to come in. And we have a list of, from the feasibility study that was done, a list of the type of businesses that would strive in our community. I mean, look, Monticello and Martin Luther King are what they are, but look, Harlem used to be like that. Fulton Avenue in Brooklyn used to be like that. Baltimore used to be like that. So it's not like we're at a point where we can't come back. It's just a matter of knowing and putting the right things in place at the right time to make it happen. And I mean, it's definitely challenging, but I think we're on the right path, and the more support and help we can get, and the more we can get the information. I mean, this is extremely important just to be able to come up here and talk about it, because I think a lot of people really don't understand what an SID is and what its role is. Because I mean, we're constantly getting bombarded with, oh, you guys need to be providing jobs. You guys need to be doing this. You know, I got to be quite honest with you. Christmas decorations are the last thing on our mind. But yet it was such a big tipping point a couple of years ago that folks were coming. I mean, I was hearing some outrageous things. But, you know, that's not – I could care less about the Christmas decorations. But you know, so I mean, there's so many challenges, and
there's so much more that's needed.
Right.
And for me, it's I gotta be honest, it's self-serving for me, because as the community gets better, as it flourishes, it makes business better for me. You can then get better employees, you can get tenants for your properties, and I think if folks look at it that way, it kind of makes more sense to buy into it. Another one of the challenges too is talking about the properties and things. A big challenge, and I think one of the main reasons we don't get a lot of the full participation that we need from the property owners is that, and you and I talked about this briefly, a lot of the property owners aren't there. You can't locate them. The LLCs, the people who are just slum landlords who bought the properties and just sitting on it until MLK turns into downtown, which it will eventually.
They're looking for the great day when the steamrollers come up there and they can sell off.
Right. Yeah. And without a proper redevelopment plan in place, and without anybody nudging them to make them take care of these vacant properties, you know, if nobody's going to bother you, why not just pay the minimal taxes that you're paying and let it stay until the investment grows into something?
There was there was supposed to be a plan called, originally there was a plan. What happened to it? Where's the plan? What happened to
The plan is there. Actually, we are coordinating meetings to begin to revise the plan. The MLK, both Monticello Avenue and MLK Drive are redevelopment areas. Now that it's one district, we thought it just made sense to create one plan. And the plan, quite frankly, is outdated. Usually when the plan gets opened, it is to accommodate one particular development project. I wasn't there when those charrettes took place. I wasn't there when all those community meetings went on. What I do know is what's in that document, and it severely needs to be updated. We need to increase the density. We need to make it more developer friendly. We need to review what businesses are prohibited. I mean, right now someone can open up a funeral home in the middle of the drive, and that would be completely inappropriate. So.
Yeah.
But in getting the plans right is laying the appropriate foundation. We tend to build things on very fragile surfaces, and we need to get that redevelopment plan and that zoning
It's a
right.
diplomatically spoken
Thank you.
term. Having lived long enough to know what that used to be, I tell my kids, we used to window shop on Jackson Avenue.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I don't want to tell on Tyrone, but I think he remembers as well.
Yeah, we used to, Barbara Irvin tells me a story about having a whole drawer full of white left-hand gloves because the style was to walk down the street after church. You go down King Drive with one glove on and one glove off, and you lose it. You got a whole drawer full of these gloves. It was what you did. You went to get to the ice cream parlors and whatnot. The world has changed. Things are much, and there are a lot of reasons why we have this issue. But what made you guys? When I came to the meeting, I'm listening to you fussing with these people. I'm saying, this is weird, because you guys are trying to explain. Here's what we're trying to do, and I think they did get it. Actually, I think they did get it. I think people left that meeting who had come to the meeting and I'm not paying 1 cent more. They left differently.
Oh, we left with a couple of the larger complainers volunteering time now. You know, they want to get involved and sit at the table, which that opportunity has always been there for them to do.
All right, listen, we've run out of time.
We're getting kicked out.
Mr. Morgan, we need another segment.
Listen, I've already told my producer seriously that we're going to do this again, maybe several times.
Yeah, we love to come up and update you as to some of the things going on. And,
so don't worry about it.
All right.
If somebody wanted to reach the Jackson Hill SID, give me a telephone number, give me an address, give me an email.
Well, we have a website, www.jacksonhillms.com. Our office number is 201-984-0560. We're there from 10 to 6, Monday through Friday. And you can email me, Michelle Massey, at director@jacksonhillms.com.
And if they want to find you, Tyrone, they just go to Independent Beauty Supply.
There you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Our office is located at 99 Monticello Avenue.
Which is really part of Independent Beauty Supply.
It's next to it.
Yeah, it's next to it. Okay, so we're almost out of time. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's program. We will be back again with the Jackson Hill SID. I don't believe in hitting and quitting. We're going to have to do it again. It's only fair. All right?
Well, we appreciate that.
All right, this is Earl Morgan signing off for the Earl Morgan Hour until next week. I want to thank my guests, Tyrone Rose and Michelle Massey, who have got a great challenge. And, we'll do what we can do here to see that you can accomplish something. Well, we're out. That's it for tonight. Thank you very much, everyone.